Have you ever been hurt by somebody? You don't have to answer me, I know you did. And another rhetorical question, but I still have to ask it. Have you ever been humiliated by somebody? Did somebody disgrace you in public? Yeah. All of the above and many others, we all have a fair share that people talk against us, humiliate us, curse us, use us, misuse us, mistreat us, etc. And in that moment that a situation like this happens, you stop being such a nice person, right? You are a nice person till that moment. As somebody not too long ago told me, "You're such a nice person." I said, "Yeah, till you get me upset. I'm a nice person when I'm calm. If you step on my toes, you might find a whole different person." So that's how all of us are. We're nice, we try to be nice, we try to be polite, we try to be good and kind and courteous and charitable until somebody goes against us, does something that hurts us, and then we turn into a not nice person. Now one might say that this is maybe an attribute that is built in, that Hashem gave us this instinct that I shouldn't be stepped on. Somebody hurts me or does something against me, should be an instinct to protect myself, to stand against the attack. But the sad reality is that most people in a situation like that, they will not forgive and they will not forget. Somebody said something against you, somebody did something against you, and maybe there was a reaction, there wasn't a reaction. But later on, very few people will forgive, and very few people will actually forget. Some people will forgive, but won't forget. So to forgive and to forget, that doesn't always come together, but unfortunately most of us don't have that. So now comes the questions of all questions. In our week's parasha, we are in Parashat Vayigash, and we are reading about the drama, the story about Yosef. And how can it be that Yosef, after everything that he went through, just forgets the past, like as if nothing happened? It's almost unhuman. And I'll remind you very soon about the entire past. But you know, the least of it is the fact that his brothers kidnapped him, tried to kill him, sold him for a few pennies, told the father that he was killed by an animal, and everything else, that the chain reaction, and he just forgets like as if the past never happened. How? And like I told you, it's almost unhuman. So before we dive into the parasha, into the class, into starting to understand how could it be even that a human being like Yosef, after what he's been through, the brothers just show up into his life and like as if nothing ever happened. And more than that, the Torah doesn't tell me a story for me to have a historical event. The Torah is coming to tell me if this happened in the Torah and the Torah is telling me about it, must be that this can be found in my personal life. Now how can I behave like a Yosef? So before we dive into this interesting parasha, and I want to just dedicate the class very quickly to the health of Eli Shalom ben Irina, and Henia bat Bracha Devor Alea, and Bracha Bruna Luba bat Chana, and also Natalie Dvora bat Miriam. Should all have a refuah shlema, a good and speedy recovery, and anyone who needs a speedy recovery and strong health should have it. And also to dedicate the class Leilu Nishma, to the elevation of the soul of Valentina Chaya bat Chaim. And her yahrzeit is tonight, and may her soul have an aliyah, and she'll find a resting place in Gan Eden, and very soon she'll be with us with the coming of Mashiach, along with everybody else that is waiting to be resurrected. So, a quick reminder with the story of Yosef. There was maybe a good cause for that, because the brothers of Yosef, to defend themselves, said that he started. He went and told off to our father, to Yaakov, the things that we're doing, and he kind of brought him on himself. We're not going to judge now who's right, who's wrong. It's irrelevant. But, you know, the story very briefly, Yosef's brothers kidnapped him. At first they wanted to kill him. Then they decided it's not going to be a good idea to have blood on their hands. So they took him out of the pit, sold him to the Arabs, who took him down to Mitzrayim, who was then sold to Potiphar. You know the story with his wife. He went to jail, sat in jail, came out of jail, became the king, the second to the king, became a very powerful individual that to compare it to our days, like one of the biggest world leaders. That's the power of Yosef, because Egypt was one of the biggest empires, if not the biggest, and he was the second to the king, and suddenly from being a teenager, and then later on a prisoner, suddenly he becomes one of the most powerful men in the world. And then, of course, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the master of the universe, turns the events around, that the brothers come down to Mitzrayim, and here's an encounter after 22 years. Somehow they don't recognize him, which also can raise a few questions. It's your brother. How can you not recognize him? Okay, 22 years passed. He was 17 when he left. He wasn't 2. So he has a beard now. Can't recognize him. He recognizes them like that. They don't recognize him. Okay, but we're not going to address this question right now. Nevertheless, after the entire drama that he puts them through, first arresting them, telling them that they're spies, then releasing them, keeping Shimon in jail, telling them, go bring me their other brother. They have to go back to Canaan, to Eretz Israel. They're bringing Binyamin down. He kind of plays around with them, but then he decides to just reveal the show and tells them, I'm your brother, I'm Yosef. And to top all that, he says, you have nothing to worry about. Everything is okay. Water under the bridge. It's all good. You can come and settle in Mitzrayim, and I will support you financially. Okay. I don't know how many people can just forgive and forget so fast. So, as usual, I would like to set the tone of the class with a quick story that I think will put things in a good perspective. That I'm not going to mention names, even though it's a known story, but a few years ago there was a story about a young individual, a Breslev Hasid, who, besides that he was a teacher, he decided he needed to make some extra money. He became a driver who took kids in the morning to the kindergarten and to the school and bring them back. You might remember that story. I think it was about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't remember. Horrible story that one day he takes the kids to school. In the afternoon, when he comes to the bus, he goes to the back of the bus. One of the kids fell asleep in the back of the bus, and he was left on the bus the whole morning because he didn't know he's in the back, and needless to say, the kid died. And 3-year-old, 4-year-old, something like that. And he was arrested, of course, for the negligence, so they didn't know what's going on. And then he was placed in house arrest. And while the parents of the toddler were sitting Shiva, the grandfather said, listen, I know you're all upset about this driver, whether he was negligent, he forgot, but nevertheless, we are mourning now the death of this little child, but we have to remember that this driver has 3 little children, and they will miss him too if he chas v'shalom goes to jail. I mean, we have to understand both sides of the story. It's a tragedy for us, but let's not forget that he has kids. To make a long story short, the grandfather called the driver and told him, please come and sit Shiva with us. And he's like, I can't look at the mother in the face. After convincing, he came, he sat Shiva with them, he prayed with them, and later on, when they got very attached, later on in the trial, the grandfather, this is all the grandfather of the kid that died, comes to the judge and he says, before you can start the trial, I want to quote a paragraph in the Talmud. And it says that, that can be found in the Yerushalmi Talmud, that if a man deals with meat, like a butcher, and he cuts big pieces of meat, and by mistake, he cuts his hand off. Where the right hand cuts the left hand off. And it says there, he quotes that if the left hand gets cut off, the left hand doesn't come and asks for the right hand to be punished, because the left hand knows it's all one big body. Therefore, the grandfather asked mercy from the judge, and the judge actually saw the power of this quote, and he went very, very easy on the driver. That really, yeah, you can blame him for negligence or whatever. It's irrelevant right now, but he got a very easy sentence, and he only was sentenced to a lot of community work, community service, instead of going to jail, because it was very important for the grandfather. We are suffering that the child was lost, but why should now another 3 children be suffering because the father is being put in jail? So he didn't want to do that. Anyways, to make a long story short, the judge found favor, and the grandfather and the driver went together in partnership in a huge campaign about how not to forget kids in the cars, and everything was safety with kids, and did a lot of good things. So this story, and it hit headlines in Israel, the whole story, and it really sounds like a crazy story. The guy, imagine the parents of the little toddler. The guy, let's say, now put some blame on him. You forget our child in the car, the child dies, and how do you want us to deal with you? And of course, the parents accepted it and forgave. And like I told you, they became a very good connection. Okay, so all this sounds like a very, very crazy story. I don't know how many people will be able to handle such a story. But even when you're reading such a story, and you're seeing how the parents forgave and moved on, it's still nothing compared to the story of Yosef. If you're really focusing on any detail what the brother did to Yosef and what he had to go through, forget what they did to him. What was the result? Can you imagine the years of Yosef sitting in jail, and all that's going on in his mind is, I'm here because my brother sold me. So it's not just the fact that they sold him and kidnapped him, it's all the events that led after that. Now try to imagine what's going on in Yosef's mind when he sees them. Can you imagine? They just walk in and he's like, oh, really? Try to imagine what's going on in his mind. Any other person would right away kill them or throw them to jail and do exactly what they did to me. Okay, so Yosef sees them, he talks to them. Of course, in the beginning it was a little bit harsh. He pretended that they're spies and everything. But less relevant is what was going on in his mind. More important is how come it seems that he forgave them, right? But you know, there's no place in the Torah indicates that he actually forgave them. The fact is that he didn't forgive them. Rabbeinu Bechaye says, did you find anywhere in the Torah that they asked for forgiveness? Did you find anywhere in the Torah that he actually said, I forgive you? Rabbeinu Bechaye says, they didn't ask forgiveness, he didn't forgive. It doesn't say anywhere that he forgave them. Later on, we're going to learn that there's proof that he didn't forgive them. But right now, we are in the encounter, and a more deep question is that Yosef never forgave them. He deals with them, he accepts them, but he doesn't forgive them. He doesn't forgive them, but he decides that he will still live amongst them. Okay? So he says, okay, I'm not going to forgive them, but being together as a family and helping them out is more important. So he kind of says there's a limit to the disagreement. Okay? I will put my honor aside, I will put a lot of things aside. We should still live together. Now, if you're thinking about it, that's not such a simple thing. Your brothers do such a thing, you decide not to forgive them, but to accept them and to let them live by you and to support them. So there's much more depth to that. Now, we have to understand that a lot of people, when they read the text, they realize, oh, if Yosef accepted them, and of course then invited them to live in Mitzrayim, that he naturally forgave them. The fact is that he didn't forgive them. That's a fact. One of the many places where we find a fact that he didn't forgive them is that next week is the 10th of Tevet, the fast of the 10th of Tevet. Some great sages explain and say that that's the most severest fast. More than Tisha B'Av, more than Yom Kippur. And why? Because all the other fasts, if they won't fall on Shabbat. Usually if a fast day will fall on Shabbat, it will be delayed. And the fast of Asara B'Tevet, that even if it falls, like 2 years ago it fell on a Friday, we fast on the Friday. Usually, let's say fast of Esther or Yud Zayin B'Tammuz will fall on a Friday, it will be moved to the next week. Asara B'Tevet doesn't get moved. And really on the Asara B'Tevet, and that's next Tuesday, by the way, and what are we fasting? The beginning of the siege on Yerushalayim that led to the destruction of the temple. And when we're talking about the destruction of the first temple, what's the first thing? The second temple. What's the first thing that comes up to our mind? Sinat Chinam, right? Baseless hate. Or hatred. So when we, and it depends on the communities, when we read the prayers of some of the fast days, some communities also read it on Yom Kippur, some communities read it on Tisha B'Av, but nevertheless, we read a certain prayer that in the merit of the 10 martyrs, Asara Arugei Malchut, that we should be forgiven, etc. And it says in the text of the prayer that the 10 martyrs were as a result for the 10 brothers of Yosef that sold him. Now, if Yosef would forgive them, then there shouldn't be a punishment later on that they all had to come back again to be punished. Because we do know that the 10 martyrs, Asara Arugei Malchut, are incarnations of the 10 brothers that had to come back and be punished. And I'll explain that more in depth as we go into the class. But nevertheless, so we are facing now, first of all, the situation that Yosef didn't forgive them. Now, like I mentioned, next week, and usually Parashat Vayigash will fall close to Asara B'Tevet. This year it's mamash a week before. Then Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of Tevet, is when we commemorate, we fast for the destruction of the temple. Like I told you, the first thing that comes up to our mind is a concept that is called Sinat Chinam. Now you can't really translate Sinat Chinam into English, because Sinat Chinam, you can translate it as hatred or baseless hate. But in Hebrew, Sinah is hate and Chinam is free. So what's so free about the hate? In Hebrew, in grammar, doesn't make sense. Sinat Chinam, I hate you for no reason. If I hate you, there is a reason. It's not Chinam, it's not for free. It's not that something that just came about. There's a reason. If I hate you, there's a reason. I don't hate you for no reason. Now, why is that important to us to focus on? Because hating, if I have hate towards another person, that means that I don't see the whole picture. That's the easiest way to explain it. If I hate another individual, it means details are missing. Or I just don't see the whole picture, that I see it in a narrow way, so it develops hate in me. So with that said, we are presented with two very important, deep, and hard questions. First question is, where does Yosef find he doesn't forgive, and again, here's where we have a little bit of an issue with the Hebrew and the translation to English, because in Hebrew it says, Yosef lo salach, he didn't forgive, אבל הוא מחל להם. Now if you put the words in Google Translate or in a dictionary, limchol velisloach in Hebrew, both in English are to forgive, but it's in Hebrew, it's not the same word. And I'll explain shortly the difference between to limchol velisloach. And like I told you, when you translate it to English, both it will show you forgive. So I'll explain very soon the difference. But the question is, where does Yosef find the power? Limchol. He doesn't forgive, but he lets go. How do you let go? Where do you come up with the power even to do such a thing? Another question that is left is, what's the reason when we're talking about this baseless hate, what's the reason that in Hebrew it says she'asin'a hi bechinam, that the hate is chinam, it's for free, for no reason. And it's important to us to understand, because the whole situation with the brothers, why did they do the whole thing? Sinat chinam. They hated him. What do you hate him for? So it's not chinam. There's a reason for that. Yosef, like I told you, he doesn't forgive, but he lets go. He puts the past behind him, but that's not the whole picture. We're missing details here in the story. When he, so to say, lets go, I'm not going to say forgive now, but when he lets go, he understands that they don't deserve it for him to let go. But he still does that. Now, very interestingly, we find in the Torah that around this entire encounter, Yosef cries a lot. Right? I hope you read the parasha before you come to the class. If you didn't, then stop the video, go read the parasha. You find in this entire encounter that he cries a lot. The interesting thing is that if you're looking in the entire Tanakh, nobody cries as Yosef. It says, okay, here and there you hear about a quote about somebody crying. Here, just in this encounter, 7 times Yosef cries. So what are you, a little kid? What are you crying all the time? So the question is he crying because he's excited to see them? Is he happy to see them? Is he crying because he's upset? Why is he crying? Why is the Torah keep repeating? And in this encounter, 7 times the Torah is telling us that Joseph cried. Why are you crying? You're upset? You angry? Or you are emotional? Why are you crying, Yosef? The answer is, a person that cries is a person that carries with him a wound. He's hurt. If you're not hurt, you don't cry. Which means that if he's crying, he's carrying baggage with him. He's hurt from them. He's carrying a wound. That's another proof that he didn't forgive them. If he would forgive them, he wouldn't cry. He would say, okay, come into the house. You're welcome to come. So by him crying all the time, it's still very deep inside his heart. He didn't forgive. He didn't forget. And when he sees them, everything comes up. Now, first of all, we have to understand that Yosef is coming to teach us that even if you don't forget, even if you don't forgive and not willing to forgive, you still have to live together. Many encounters that you have with family members, I'm not going to go further away, family members, you might not forget certain things that certain family members did, and you might not even want to forgive, but you still have to live together. And Yosef comes to teach us a very, very important thing, is that you don't have to forgive so quick, and you might not forget, but still you might have to keep the family together. So we have to understand, And again, I told you the story. We have to understand that after 22 years, just imagine what was going on in Yosef's mind. They encounter when they abduct him, and then throw him to the pit, and then take him out and sell him. And not for like $2 million. They sold him for 5 shekels. For nothing, for like a few prutot. And then all the torture that he went through, just imagine in the back of the mind, that's the cause for that. So 22 years passed, and suddenly they come and they appear in front of him. Now, what does the story tell us? Very briefly, they come to ask for food. He, of course, accuses them to being spies. He puts them in jail, and then he listens. And what do? They right away start talking. Why is this happening to us? It's probably because we sold our brother. Now it's backfiring at us. And they start talking, okay, we set the bed for ourselves, we dug our own pit. And he's listening. He understands that they do their cheshbon nefesh. They start realizing, we messed up. 22 years ago, we messed up, now it's coming back. This is our karma. It's coming back to us. They understand that they did something real bad with Yosef, and they regret. And the whole time, Yosef is eavesdropping. He wants to see. Maybe he had surveillance cameras. I don't know what they had in Mitzrayim then. But nevertheless, he's waiting to see. And he sees that they did cheshbon nefesh. They did their introspection. And they regretted the situation. So Yosef comes to a certain conclusion. And like I told you, hu mochel, limchol, I think the closest translation that I can give to the word limchol is to give up. I give up. I give up my honor. I give up my debt. I give up. That's not forgiving. He just gives up punishing them. He says, okay, you know what? I don't want you to get in trouble. I'm not going to do anything. That's limchol. You owe me X amount of money. I borrowed it to you. A year passed, 2 years passed. You can't pay. You can come and tell me, listen, I don't have the money. I won't have the money. What do I tell you? I give up. It's not forgiving. I'm not forgiving. I'm just saying, okay, you don't have the money. Fine. I give up. I give up the debt. So again, like I told you, if you put in Google Translate or go to any dictionary and you put mechila, it will tell you forgiveness. But it's not forgiveness. It's I give up. So he gives up. But he doesn't forget. What does it mean here? The word lisloach is to forget that they hurt him. He doesn't forget. He remembers very well what they did. Therefore, he's holding it and he's not willing to forgive. And it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that you have to forgive, by the way. It doesn't say anywhere, even not later on in the old Torah and Halakha, that you have to forgive. Somebody does something bad to you, the Torah doesn't force you to forgive. So Yosef stands in a place where he says, I'm willing to give up. I'm not going to punish them. I'm not going to have revenge over them. I'm just going to give up. Fine, whatever. Water under the bridge. But I won't forget what you did, and I'm not going to forgive you what you did. So now, of course, we are rolling over to another question. So if this is the case, why are you crying? Why does the Torah find it so important to tell me that Yosef was crying? The Torah tells me Yosef is crying. It doesn't tell me why. Now, usually when a person cries, what is the emotional act of crying? Is to unload a certain emotion, right? That's why it comes out in tears. I mean, it doesn't come out in any way. The Kabbalistic explanation when the tears come down is that the liquids, the water from the brain, from unloading a certain emotion, then it comes out in tears. But if he's crying, he's obviously unloading some type of an emotion. But is that happiness or anger? We don't know why he's crying, I'm saying now at this point. It might be that he's beyond happy to see his brothers, and we're going to get reunited. Maybe he's so angry, maybe he's disappointed. The Torah doesn't indicate why he's crying. But the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that every encounter, Yosef turned around and started crying. So there's one hint that tells us about the crying, and the hint is that in the beginning he sees the brothers, 10 brothers. Then he jails them, he releases them, he keeps Shimon, tells them, go bring me Binyamin. Okay, you know the story. He starts asking them questions. Do you have a father? Do you have more brothers? And they just tell him straight out. One brother is with a father, another one died. Oh really, he died. Interesting. Nevertheless, when they bring Binyamin back, then he starts talking with Binyamin. So when he sees Binyamin, he tells him a certain blessing, and that is the hint that can kind of reveal to us the reason for the crying. What does he tell him what does he tell Binyamin when he sees him? Elokim yechonecha bni. 3 words. This can be found in our parasha, book of Bereshit, chapter 43, verse 29. The translation is, may God favor you, my son. He gives Binyamin a blessing. Interestingly, Rashi explains what is this blessing? That the Hashem should bless you with kids. In this little blessing is a hint for why did Yosef cry. Because we know that he cried twice next to Binyamin. When he tells him this blessing, he starts crying. Now, if you're going to the verse, let me read the entire verse for you in English. It says, for his mercy was stride towards his brother, and he wanted to weep, so he went into the room and wept over there. So Yosef has an encounter with Binyamin, they talk, and then Yosef just can't handle it, and he goes into the room and he starts crying. So why did he start crying? Let's go to Rashi. Rashi says that while he was talking to Binyamin, first of all, they looked alike, because both the sons of Rachel. More than that, he was the closest to him. The other sons were the older sons. Binyamin was a closer son, a closer brother. So Rashi says that Yosef asked Binyamin, what are you doing? All sorts of basic questions. Then he tells him, are you married? Binyamin tells him, yes, I am married. Yosef tells him, do you have kids? Binyamin replies and says, yes, I have 10 boys. Ooh, 10 boys. What are their names? So Binyamin tells him the name of the boys, and they're very odd names. Not like what we know of Abraham, Yitzchak, Moshe, very odd names. So Yosef tells him, what's the significance of the names? Binyamin tells him that every child I name based on the suffering that my brother had to go through. So he names 10 of his boys after every encounter that his lost brother suffered. When Yosef hears that, he starts crying. Why does he start crying? Because he understands and he realized that one brother didn't forget. The others threw him to the garbage, but the youngest didn't forget him. All these years. And Rashi goes in lengths and explains the names. He was, one of the names is because my brother wasn't at my wedding. Another, the name, my brother is not learning with me. You go to Rashi, see the explanation. But Yosef hears that. That's when he completely breaks down. Because he understands one brother didn't forget. So Yosef cries from the desire to be back part of the family. He had it enough to be by himself. 22 years he's by himself. No postcards, no birthday presents, no nothing. He's by himself. And he yearns to be back in the family. He says, I'm willing to forgive all that my brothers did to me. Just to be, I want to sit in the Shabbat table with all my brothers. Maybe some others will relate with, I want to sit in the Thanksgiving table. But he wanted to sit in the Seudah with his father, with the brothers and the wives and the kids and the nieces and the nephews. He was yearning for that mishpuche, which means family. And Yosef understands that the way to become part of the family is not going to come so simple, because the family went through a shock. That's what he wants. But he understands that's going to be so simple. So, again, Yosef doesn't forgive what the brothers did, but practically, he's thinking very tactically here. As I told you many times, the advice that my father gave me many, many years ago, in this life, don't be right, be smart. Nobody cares if you're right. In the situation, you want to be smart. So Yosef says, it doesn't matter if I'm right. I'm willing to let go. I'm not forgiving. I'm letting go, because practically, that's what's going to bring us back together. I will ignore the past. I will leave the past behind. I will invite you to live amongst me. I will support you financially for many, many years, because I have an agenda. I want the family to be united. I want to be with my family. I'm willing to ignore. So like I told you, from all the texts, from all the sources and all the commentaries, Yosef did not forgive them. He was willing to let go. Therefore, the 10 martyrs had to come back in incarnations for the 10 brothers in order for them to be punished, which is, of course, raising another question. What's Yosef's philosophy here? What was he planning? What was behind this maneuver? So, for that, we have to explain a certain Gemara, a certain place in the Talmud. This can be found in 2 places in the Talmud, in Tractate Nazir and in Tractate Kiddushin. And it says, it's quoting a verse from Parashat Matot, the book of Bamidbar, chapter 30, verse 13. And the verse in Hebrew is, Isha haferam v'Hashem yislach la. Translation, her husband has revoked them. It's referring to vows. And the Lord shall forgive her. So let me give you a little bit of a background in the parasha and what it's talking in the Talmud about a certain woman who made a vow. And how can she revoke the vow? How can she nullify the vow? The husband has to do it for her. And it's talking about in this verse that the husband actually revokes the vow. And what does it say? The husband revoked it. And the Lord shall forgive her. So, interestingly, the husband nullified the vow, but she still needs to get forgiveness from Hashem. That's what the verse is telling us. That's what the Talmud is discussing. Now comes the big question. What? The husband revoked the vow. Why does she need to get forgiveness from Hashem? The Talmud elaborates by saying she didn't know her husband revoked the vow. So she went and did the sin. So she still needs to get forgiveness. Yeah, the husband revoked the vow. She didn't know. Let's say, just for the sake of the example, she made a vow not to drink wine. The husband revoked it. She went and drank the wine while knowing it's under a vow and that's a sin. So Hashem still needs to forgive her. Why is that so significant? This piece in the Talmud is because it says there in a commentary that every time that Rabbi Akiva would read this Gemara, he would cry. So we find another person that cries, right? Why was Rabbi Akiva crying every time he would get to that part of the Gemara? And just to put things in perspective, at the time of Rabbi Akiva, we didn't have the Gemara. It was written many, many years later. Okay? We're talking here that Rabbi Akiva would learn the Mishnah. Later on, the Gemara was written. I'm just putting things in perspective that one should not say, what, Rabbi Akiva learned Gemara? Rabbi Akiva is in the Gemara. The Gemara was written hundreds of years later, based on the teachings and the arguments and so forth. But Rabbi Akiva, when he would go through this teaching, he would cry. It's question, why would he cry? Because he understood that even on a bad intention, you will be punished. שאפילו על כוונה לרע צריך עונש. You didn't do the sin. You just had an intention. You're still going to get punished for that. Okay, but Rabbi Akiva, you don't have bad intentions. You are a very great tzaddik. You're a big scholar. You don't have bad intentions. Why are you so worried and you're so afraid and you cry that on an intention, a bad intention, you will get punished? You don't have any bad intentions. So there's a rabbi who lived about 150 years ago. I told you, if you quoted him a few times, his name is known as Reb Shlomo from Vilna. This is not the Vilna Gaon. And he has a few books. I quoted him some of the books. One of them is Binyan Shlomo, Choshech Shlomo, Echeshek Shlomo. Anyways, he says in one of his books that since Rabbi Akiva was an incarnation of one of the brothers of Yosef. I mean, Rabbi Akiva is one of the 10 martyrs. And he says, since the 10 brothers of Yosef got incarnated in all the individuals that end up being the 10 martyrs, one of them is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva understood that he's going to have to pay for the sin then. That's why he would cry. He didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. It's my incarnation that did. But nevertheless, he understood that the brothers of Yosef only had the intention to kill him. They didn't kill him. And he's going to have to pay for that because there was a bad intention. He didn't do anything. He knew he's going to have to pay. And unfortunately, he paid as one of the 10 martyrs. As the Romans, they combed his flesh with the iron blades and so now comes another big question. How come Yosef, he doesn't forgive, but he gives up? So much you want to be around the family table? Must be something greater than that. When Yosef is willing to let go, he's revealing something revolutionary, something completely different, something that teaches us a big breakthrough. What does he teach us? That evil people are the messenger of a good God. I'll say it again. Evil people, bad people, which means if somebody does something bad to me, he's an evil individual. They're still a messenger of a good God. So Yosef says, I will let go. You know why? Because you didn't know that you are messengers of God. If you knew, then maybe I wouldn't let go. But I'm letting go from what you did because you didn't even know that you are messengers of God. I mean, after all, it says clearly in the Torah, don't worry, Hashem sent me here that I will become king and rule over the land and able to finance you. He tells them that straight out. But really, Yosef realizes something much, much bigger, that he's not looking at them as evil people. You sold me, you abducted me. He sees beyond that and he understands that they're just the messengers. So he tells them, I'm willing to let go because you didn't even realize that you're messengers. Yosef understands that the bad that they did to him, abducting him, throwing him to the pit, selling him, everything, all the reactions that came after that, he understands that it was all pre-planned by the master of the universe. How do we know that? Well, they saw it in the dreams. They even told him. They had prophetic dreams that he's going to rule over them. So he says, well, really, That was all predestined. They were just the executors. They were just messengers of the God that wanted me to be the king of Egypt, second to the king. Basically saying, in other words, they brought me to the place where I was supposed to come. So I have to have any anger towards them? They just fulfilled their mission. That's very profound words. They brought me to the place I was supposed to come. I was supposed to come from here to here. If it would be up to me, I wouldn't come here. They brought me here. Can you imagine if Yosef would get some type of a message, you have to go down to Mitzrayim, be in jail for 10 years, then you go back again into jail for another year, and then you're going to have to go through all this, and eventually you'll become the king. What would be his reaction? Yeah. Now, if you start looking at yourself, how many times you were forced into a certain situation that brought you where you were supposed to come, that you would never go there by yourself. So Yosef realizes, they actually brought me where I was supposed to go. Yeah, the way was not so comfortable. But why should I be angry at them? They actually did what the plan was set. And from that you can take a very powerful message that nobody is able to harm you unless Hashem agrees to that. I will repeat it again, and when I repeat, I need to hear it again. Nobody can harm you in any type of a way unless Hashem agrees to that. Because if you think that they can harm you without the supervision and the approval of Hashem, that's straight out heresy. So if Hashem agrees to the situation, there's a good intention. Right? Hashem agreed for them to sell him, etc. There was a good intention. Now, what we need to take from that practically is that not every moment in life is good. Right? You don't need to tell you that. You know that already. That many moments in your life are not good moments. But every moment in your life would lead you to a place where you're supposed to get. So most of the moments, if you're looking at our life as a time frame or like a film with many, many frames, most of it is not good. But nevertheless, every encounter, every situation in my life will lead me where I'm supposed to go. Not to lead me to something good, by the way. It would lead me where I have to go. I have to meet a certain individual, whether it's my spouse. I have to do a certain thing. I need to be led to the point where I need to arrive. Last week, my daughter she went on a trip to Europe. She went to London, she went to Paris, she went to a few other locations. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She inherited my good luck with flights. Baruch Hashem, I didn't fly for the last few years. Hopefully I don't need to fly anymore. But in the past, every flight that I had to attend, every trip, I never made flights, always missed flights, always was delayed. I have the worst karma with airports. Something with me in airports. And you're laughing. You remember hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. Wherever there's problems, I'm somehow stuck there. Always missing flights, always delayed. And it's not that I'm some shlemazel or something. It's not even my fault. Yeah, it's not your fault. So my daughter inherited that. Missed flights, it keeps calling me, Abba, don't ask. We missed this flight. I went on the wrong direction in the train. And of course she got very upset. It's very expensive buying new tickets and delays and a new hotel. And she didn't understand. I mean, she understood in a physical way the delays, but she didn't understand as I was trying to explain to her that when the master of the universe decides for you to be somewhere, whether you are delayed, you miss your flight, whatever it is, it's because right now you need to be in that place to do something spiritual. And I'm sure you remember a few years back, I was on one of my tours to London. Tour went perfectly smooth. On the way back, as I'm driving to the airport, somebody cuts me and I bump into the side, 2 tires blow up. I'm sitting on the maiden on the way to the airport. Of course, I missed the flight. Waited 2.5 hours for the road assistance because I had 2 flat tires. So 2.5 hours, I'm sitting in the car in the middle of the highway. Needless to say, missed the flight, missed everything. And in my mind, I was like, okay, obviously Hashem doesn't want me to fly tonight. And I'm stuck on a highway. It's not that I can do something productive. And I realized that I have to be in that spot to elevate some type of a godly spark from that location. So since I was traveling, I had a lot of food with me in the middle of the highway. I washed my hands, said, Amotzi lechi min haaretz. I made a meal to say Birkat Hamazon. I read Tehillim, learned Torah. I was there 2.5 hours. I understood that in this specific place in the world, I have to elevate godly sparks with my blessings, with my prayers, with my Torah learning, and that's it. And the same thing I told to my daughter. You're stuck right now over here. You have a connection physically to the place. If you just bum around there, you didn't do nothing. Say some Tehillim, pray, do something. You obviously have to elevate some godly sparks from where you are. So that will come and explain to us that, yeah, many places where I have to go, or that the universe is leading me, I'm not happy about it. But who says I have to be happy about every little thing that happens to me? I might have to be there. Now, I wouldn't voluntarily go there, so there are messengers that will take me there. Now, I'm going to be upset at the messenger, when really, the one who sent it, it's all for a good cause. I might not understand everything in the first glance. Now that we concluded that Yosef is a very special individual, that he, first of all, he sees that it's more important to put the family together than he's willing to ignore the bad actions of the brothers. Very noble. Next, we understand that Yosef is already seeing the big picture by understanding that it was all predestined and planned by the master of the universe, and the brothers are just messengers. Psh. So we understand everything, we understand where he's coming from, what drove him, what was the idea behind it. But now we're left with another problem. If the Torah is telling me the story, it means that it has to be in me. I have to relate with the story. It means I have to find a situation like this and see how is that relating with me. How can I apply what Yosef did? Now Yosef is a very special individual. He actually won the title Hatzadik. I'm a tzaddik. I'm not even close to his toenail. So he's a great individual. Who says that I can do the same thing? I don't know many that will go through what he went through and forgive the brothers like that. Some people take your parking spot, you don't forgive them for 2 years. Now I need to forgive somebody who sold me, abducted me and sold me. So who says that I can relate with Yosef and say, oh, what's the big deal? Next time somebody trashes my name or assaults me or steals from me, no problem, he's a messenger. I will walk in the park, no problem for me. So if one might ask, how is that story relating to me? So there is a proof to that we can relate with that and apply that in our life too. There's a story, I told you that story many, many times, but there's a story with David HaMelech. David HaMelech, if somebody had a bad, rough time in his life, David HaMelech is a very good candidate. While he was king, his son Avshalom starts an uprising against his father to throw him off the throne. His own flesh and blood, after he had to conquer Yerushalayim, his son starts an uprising against him. How do you say not an uprising? A revolt. A mered. Then the head of the Sanhedrin, Shimei ben Gera, goes and tells him, you, the same way that you threw Shaul off his throne, now your own son is throwing you off your throne. And needless to say, that Shimei ben Gera curses him. You know the whole story. And if you don't know, go to the book of Shmuel Bet, Shmuel 2, Shmuel B, chapter 16. Read the chapter, you'll see the whole story. But then David HaMelech steps forward and says a very powerful, noble sentence. When the family of Tzruya that was around him, it was the general Yoav ben Tzruya, there was many other individuals, they wanted to kill Shimei ben Gera. I mean, after all, David HaMelech is the king, King David, he's the king. You go and curse the king, you deserve to be put to death. The story says that Yoav ben Tzruya already took out his sword. We have to kill him. He called him like a dirty dog, whatever. How dare he talk to the king like that? David HaMelech stops him and he tells him, Hashem amar lo kalel. God told him to curse me. If somebody would curse you when you're the king, cut his head off. David HaMelech, he doesn't change the image, the picture, how he saw things. I'll say it in a more metaphorical way, he changes the frame. He doesn't relate so much with the situation. He sees, as they say, the big picture. The interesting thing is that the last thing that David HaMelech commands his son Shlomo is to kill Shimei ben Gera. Later on, he commands his son, last thing you need to fulfill my wish, you have to kill him. Saying, in other words, the punishment he will get, but he's going to get it from Hashem, not from me. David HaMelech understands what's between me and the person who cursed me is for me to see the good in him. The punishment, I'm not saying he should get a punishment, not get a punishment. Let him deal with Hashem. As I told you, I'm sidetracking now from the story, but I told you that not a few years ago we were learning here. Some guy came, attended the 3-4 classes. At the end of the class, he approaches me and he tells me, I want to ask your forgiveness. I don't even know who you are. He's like, I spoke Lashon Hara about you. I slandered you and gossiped about you, and I want to ask your forgiveness. I told him, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You're wrong address. He says, why? He says, you have to ask forgiveness from God, not from me. I don't even know you. I don't even know what you said. And frankly, I don't care. You have to ask your forgiveness from God, not from me. If He willing to forgive you, good for you. I don't care. So he wasn't happy with my answer. He thought I'll tell him I forgive you and you're free to go. I told him, like I told you, I don't even know what you said. I don't even know you. Go ask forgiveness from Hashem. Let's see if He forgives you. If Hashem forgives you, when you're good to go. Same thing with David. I'm saying David like he's my friend. Same thing with King David. He says, Shimei ben Gera curses me? Who cares? His issue about the cursing, that's his issue with Hashem. My issue right now with the person who cursed me is to see the good in him. That's what I need to focus on. So when somebody hurts you, there are 3 ways how you can deal with it. You choose. And it doesn't matter, the person can curse you, slander you, steal from you, physically hurt you. There's 3 ways how you can deal with it. The first one is to put your head down. Saying, in other words, here's the cheek, give me another slap. You show weakness, you become a shmate, and you're saying, fine, I'll take another one. I wouldn't recommend that. The next option that you have is to be angry. And that's what most people take. Option number 2. But there's another option. And that is to ask. Ask a question. What does Hashem is telling me right now? and Hashem answers, it's always for the good. So you choose if you want to be upset and angry, which would lead to many negative things, or just to say, what is Hashem telling me right now? I might not hear the answer, but I still have to ask the question. Yosef doesn't deal with the brothers. He doesn't look at the brothers as the people who brought him to Mitzrayim. He doesn't deal with it. He sees way above that. He's focusing on their mission. The fact that they brought him to Mitzrayim. He sees the big picture. He doesn't look at, if he would look directly at their action, he would know, okay, I'm going to punish them, I'm going to have revenge. Oh, what they did to me. He sees way above that. And again, I'm going to use the slang they use in English, the big picture. He sees the big picture. He sees their mission. And he concludes, and the message is given to us with 7 words. And again, everything that we're concluding here, it's not thoughts. The Torah is telling you clear. Yosef uses 7 words. Ve'ata lo atem shalachtem oti hena ki ha'elokim. In English, it's not 7 words. But in Hebrew, it's 7 words. You can find it in our parasha, chapter 45, verse 8. By him saying, it's not you that sent me here. God sent me here. He tells them straight out, I have no issue with you. I'm not happy. I might not forgive you for many, 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 many years. But that shouldn't stop our business together. And the proof is, I know you didn't bring me here. God sent me here. Saying in other words, when I need to take it to my own personal life, if you hate a certain individual, and you have to ask yourself after the class, who do I hate? I'll tell you a joke before I give you the conclusion. There's a rabbi who goes on the podium, 500, 600, 800 people in the synagogue, Erev Yom Kippur. They're about to start Yom Kippur, where everybody has to forgive each other. The rabbi starts his drasha, his, sermon, by asking, is there anybody in the crowd here that has nobody that hates them? Hundreds of people are sitting in the synagogue, nobody raises their hand. The rabbi says, maybe you didn't hear me well. Is there anybody in the crowd that can say, nobody hates me? Suddenly, an old lady from the end, in the women's section, raises her hand, and he says, oh! And she says, I can testify that nobody hates me. He is already thinking, must be such a special woman. And he tells her, how did you do that? What did you do? I mean, how did you manage that nobody hates you? So what does she say? They're all dead. So, so going back to what I said, if you hate somebody, and you're going to have to do your homework after the class and go home and ask yourself, does somebody hate me? Probably. Now you have to ask yourself a different question. Do you hate a person? That's a bigger question. Of course I hate. I hate a lot of people. So if you hate another person, it means that you only see the bad and you don't see the good. Like I told you before, if you have hate, you don't have all the details. You're focusing on some of the details. So I'll simplify it. If you hate another person, it means that you only see the bad, you don't see the good. And I'm talking about the encounter, the story, whatever you're dealing with. And the conclusion is that sometimes Hashem gets dressed into bad people, that you will have jealousy or whatever, just that you will grow. You know, if there wouldn't be any sense of competition in your life or any jealousy, you would never grow. when we're talking about if jealousy is a positive thing, then our sages explain, yes, jealousy is a very positive thing. I mean, you can take it to a negative place. It's a positive thing because kinat sofrim tarbe chokhmah. When you're jealous of a scholar, then you increase your learning. So sometimes Hashem dresses himself in evil people to cause you to be competitive, to be jealous, to move yourself. If not, you wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't grow. And like I told you, you might find hate towards an individual, but it means you don't see the good, you see the bad. And on that, our sages explained that any person that is angry, it's like as if you did idol worship. What's the connection? I get angry 50 times a day, including all of you, by the way. So now our sages say that if I'm angry, every time I'm angry, it's like I'm an idolater. The answer is very simple. Because if you're angry, you are saying there's no supervision from above. Which means anybody can do whatever they want. Saying in other words, that if every time that I get angry, I really don't believe, I don't have emunah in Hashem. That's why our sage says, it's like an idolater. Because you don't believe in Hashem. You're saying in other words, I'm angry at you because you did something to me, not understanding that the master of the universe is the architect of this entire encounter. So the conclusion is, you don't have to love everybody. Okay? Don't worry. The Torah doesn't tell you have to love everybody. Even though I know many will say, yeah, but the Torah tells you, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you have to love everybody like you love yourself. You don't have to love everybody. Okay? I'm summarizing a lot of years of learning by telling you, put aside now v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, okay? You don't have to love everybody. And you don't have to forgive everybody, by the way. There's no any place in halakha that forces you to forgive everybody. And I'm not going to go to extreme situation when a person is molested, raped, and many other bad things. I'm not expecting that person to forgive the molester or the rapist or whatever it is. So I'm telling you and I'm concluding, you don't have to love everybody, and you don't have to forgive everybody. Somebody's not good for you, they're toxic to you, move away. You don't have to be in bad situations. Somebody's not good for your health, move away. But you have to understand one very important thing. And that's what Yosef understood, and that's what you need to take. The brothers threw Yosef to the pit. Now there's different opinions if they actually threw him or they had a ladder and he went down. Because if they would throw him, he would break his bones and die. Right? So some of the commentary says, yeah, they gave him a ladder to climb down. But they also gave him a ladder to climb up. So what you need to take from this unbelievable encounter of Yosef and all the wisdom behind the approach of Yosef is that behind every ladder that somebody puts for you to take you down, there's going to be a ladder that will take you up.